Greetings fellow guitar travellers and musicians everywhere, it's Rowan J. Parker here and welcome to another episode of Music Theory 101, and this is part 2 of modal theory. Now in last week's episode we went into the construction of modes, their derivation from the major scale and the names of the modes, and we sort of listened to them against their harmonic background, so we've got an appreciation of the different sounds they contain. However, that does not really explain or demonstrate why the modes all sound different. To really understand why a mode sounds different from each other is we need to look at the intervallic structure of each mode, and that's what we're going to do today. So by the end of the lesson you should have a very good appreciation of why, for instance, Ionian sounds completely different from Locrian. Alright, before we get into the lesson, I'd like to plug a forthcoming video that will be available on my website store very shortly, which is called Modal Magic, and this will be an incredibly comprehensive video aimed at guitar players who want to either understand modes or get a lot more proficient at using them. Because of all the things that I've ever taught, the amount of confusion and misunderstanding and obscurantism out there about modes is unbelievable. Most modal packages don't really explain the subject very well, and nor do they show you how to leverage the modes properly, and that's exactly what this forthcoming video aims to do. It will be massively comprehensive, about 3 hours long, so when it is available I'll let you all know, and please do have a look at it and support me that way by purchasing it. Alright, well enough of that, let's get straight into today's lesson, our modal comparison. Let's do it. Let's just do a very brief recap on last week's lesson. We discovered that there are in total 7 different modes. They're all derived from consecutive degrees of the major scale, and if we play each one against its appropriate harmony we get a sense of exactly how each mode sounds. So in the key of C major, first chord in the key of C major is C major or C major 7 in this case, and we play C to C, we hear the sound of C Ionian. Moving to the second degree of the scale, which is D minor or D minor 7 in the key of C, playing D to D gives us this sound, which is D Dorian. Then moving on to the third degree, which is E minor or E minor 7 in the key of C, and playing E to E gives us this sound, which is E Phrygian. And then mode 4 is Lydian, F Lydian in this case, chord is F major 7, playing F to F. Let's have a listen. Moving on to mode 5 is Mixolydian, starting on G, playing G to G, and the chord here is G major or G7. It's actually a G7 chord I'm playing here. Let's have a listen. And then mode 6 is Aeolian, represented by A minor or A minor 7, playing A to A. Let's have a listen. And then the weird one of the bunch, which as you know is the Locrian mode, and it's represented by B minor 7 flat 5 or B half diminished in the key of C, and it sounds like this, playing B to B. Okay, so basically that's all 7 modes: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian and Locrian, and then, as we can see there, they were all derived from the C major scale. So now let's just go right ahead and start comparing them with each other and look at the intervallic structure so we can understand why each one sounds the way it does. Let's look at the modes and divide them into their broad categories in terms of sound or tonality. So there are 3 major sounding modes, and they are Ionian and Lydian and Mixolydian. There are also 3 minor sounding modes, and they are Dorian and Phrygian and Aeolian. And there's also one final mode, which is the diminished one, which is Locrian. So let's begin by looking at the intervallic construction of Ionian first of all. So, Ionian mode sounds like this. Same as the major scale. Its intervallic construction is this. It's root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and then root or octave. There is another way of describing the construction of the scale, and that's to use jazz nomenclature, and if you do that, you get this. It's very straightforward. We get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Alright, now that's how you construct Ionian. Let's look at the construction of Lydian and compare it directly against the construction for Ionian. Here is C Lydian. It is now if you listen carefully you can hear that one of the notes is altered, and the note that is altered is the 4th degree. There it is there. is the note that's different as compared to the C Ionian scale. So what have we actually got? Well, first of all, let's give you the notes. You've got C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C. So in terms of intervallic construction, we have root, major second, major third, augmented fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and octave or root. Jazz nomenclature for the scale would be 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. So in that case, we can say that the Lydian mode differs from the Ionian mode in this way. It differs because it has a sharpened or augmented fourth, and that is why the Lydian mode sounds different from the Ionian mode. So I hope that's clear enough. The sharpened four introduces that little bit of colour into the scale. And actually, when you get familiar with the sound of Lydian, you'll find that you start preferring much the sharpened fourth as opposed the perfect fourth, which is on an Ionian scale or a major scale. It just sounds less dissonant to me. So for instance, if I strike and hold a perfect fourth against the C major 7 chord, for instance, listen to the sound. It's actually not very satisfactory, it's quite dissonant. The fourth seems to want to resolve either down a semitone to the third, or it wants to resolve up a tone to the fifth. But it's hard just to lean on that note. Doesn't sound very good. However, if you play the sharpened fourth, once your ears are acclimatised to how it sounds, it's actually quite pleasant. It's a little bit mysterious, a little bit sort of suspended or floating sounding, but it's not inherently dissonant. And that's why a lot of players prefer Lydian to Ionian, because it's actually a more pleasant and appropriate and concordant sound to play on major 7 chords. Alright, so that's us looked at Ionian and Lydian. Let's look at the next mode, which is Mixolydian. Here is C Mixolydian. Let's have a listen. Okay, now just give you the bare notes here. C Mixolydian would be C, D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C. So again, looking at the construction of this scale, how does it differ from Ionian? Well, construction will be root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, and then minor seventh interval. So that's the note that's been altered. We have a flattened seventh or minor seventh interval as opposed to the major seventh or regular seventh interval found in the major scale. So that changes the quality of the scale and makes it sound a little bit darker. Now, the chord that's represented by this mode is really a dominant sound. So when I said to you that we have 3 major modes, that's not strictly true. Ionian and Lydian are really major sounding modes. Mixolydian is rather a dominant sounding mode, and that is really a category of its own. It's broadly major in the sense that it has a major third, but the overall character of the mode is dominant, so it's not analogous to Ionian or Lydian in that sense, because they really belong to a family of sounds which I regard as being major seventh, whereas Mixolydian is very much a dominant seventh sound. Alright, so construction. In jazz nomenclature, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. Okay, so that's Mixolydian. So we could arrange these 3 modes in their order of brightness. Now, in fact, the brightest sounding mode is not Ionian, as you might expect. It is Lydian, because the sharpened fourth increases the brightness of that scale. Then it is followed by Ionian, which is our plain old major scale, and then followed by Mixolydian, which is a little bit darker because of the flattened 7th degree. Okay, now that's the major sounding modes, or broadly major sounding mode. Let's go on and look at the minor sounding modes now. Let's go ahead and look at the construction of the minor mode, starting with the most common minor mode, which is Dorian. And Dorian sounds like this. Let's have a listen. The construction of Dorian: root, major second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, minor seventh, and then root or octave. In jazz nomenclature, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, and 1. So in some ways, Dorian and Mixolydian are quite similar to each other because they are the same construction apart from the 3rd degree. In Mixolydian we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7 and 1, and Dorian is the same except we have a flattened third, so we've got 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7 and 1. Which is why sometimes you hear Mixolydian and Dorian mixed together over certain dominant types, even though it shouldn't work theoretically. It's something you do hear from time to time. Okay, so you can see from the construction of Dorian that it is a minor mode because it has a flattened third and a flattened seventh. But because it has the major 6 or regular 6 interval, it's not a particularly dark sounding minor mode, so it's in fact the least minor of the minor sounding modes, the least dark. Let's move on to the next mode now, which is Aeolian, another minor mode. This is what Aeolian sounds like. And the intervallic construction of that is root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6th, minor 7th, and then root or octave. Jazz nomenclature for this will be 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and 1. So directly comparing against Dorian, we can see that it is a bit darker than Dorian because it has the interval of the minor 6 or flattened 6, and that darkens the sound of the scale. So it's a more minor sounding scale than Dorian is. It's not quite as bright as Dorian. Alright, now Aeolian you find all over the place in rock music, heavy rock music. Just think of bands like Iron Maiden. Their entire output is pretty much Aeolian, so incredibly commonly used mode in rock. You will probably know it as the natural minor scale. Alright, let's move on to the last minor mode, which is Phrygian, and this one is quite dark, so let's have a listen. It sounds like this. So I think you can clearly hear from that one, that sounds a lot darker. So let's just investigate the construction to find out why it does sound as dark as it does. Okay, so here we go. We've got root, minor 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6, minor 7th, and root or octave. And jazz nomenclature now, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and 1. So how is it different from our preceding Aeolian scale? Well, it's different in this way. The 2nd degree in the scale is flatted. It has a minor 2nd or flat 2nd interval, and that really causes the scale to darken considerably because it is quite a dissonant interval, especially if it's struck or held against the chord. Let's have a listen. So that accounts for the darkness found in Phrygian. So it's like an Aeolian scale except it has a flat 2, and obviously the flat 2 really darkens the sound of the scale and makes it sound quite tense and menacing almost, though it can also sound wistful and starkly beautiful as well. It's apart from Locrian, it's the least used of the modes. Whenever you hear Phrygian, it's often a mode called Phrygian dominant, which is actually derived from harmonic minor, but pure Phrygian derived from the major scale is comparatively less used, but it is a brilliant sound. It's a lovely sound and one of my favourite ones, probably because it's not used that much. Alright, so that covers our 3 minor modes, and we put them in ascending order of brightness or darkness. The least dark minor mode is Dorian, and then Aeolian is darker than that, and Phrygian is darker than that. So just to recap why that is, Dorian 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, Aeolian 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, so it's darker because it has a flat 6, and then Phrygian, the darkest of all, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and 1 is darker because of the flat 2. Alright, hope that's clear enough. Let's go and look at the last mode now, or one out the bunch, which is Locrian. Let's look at the last mode, the joker in the pack. It's Locrian, and unlike all the other modes which have been broadly major or minor, this one has a unique sound that is diminished. So let's go ahead and have a listen to Locrian. Okay, you can clearly hear that sounds pretty dark and quite unstable, so let's investigate the intervallic construction to find out why that is. Alright, here we go. It is root, minor 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, diminished 5th, minor 6, minor 7, and root or octave. And in jazz terminology, 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7, and 1. So you can see that the majority of the intervals in the scale are flattened, so it stands to reason that it's going to sound pretty dark. It sounds particularly dark because it has a flattened 5th or diminished 5th interval. It has this sound within the chord. The chord contains an interval called a tritone, a flattened fifth or diminished fifth, one time known as the Diabolus in Musicus, the devil in music. And well, you know, if you were an early Christian, you better not have been caught using this interval, because it was a sign of devil worship as much as the cloven hoof. So you had to stay away from that one, because you could be excommunicated or far worse. So it's funny to think that this interval, which is integral to the blues scale, is the blue note in the blues scale, was at one time considered to be a sign of devil worshipping. It just shows you how far we've come. Anyway, brief digression there. So that's the reason Locrian sounds darker than all the rest. It is the flattened fifth or diminished fifth that causes the additional darkness in the scale and the mode. It's also the reason why the mode tends towards instability, because the stability provided by a perfect fifth or a regular fifth is undermined here by the flattened fifth, and that's why it sounds like an uncomfortable point. So you'll find that when you come across modes for improvisation, you come across 6 out of the 7 very regularly. You'll hear Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixed Lydian, Aeolian a lot. Locrian is a static fixed point, like an actual modal type groove. Very, very rarely, because the instability inherent in the scale really needs resolution somewhere else, which means it needs to move from that sound to something a little bit more concordant or less dissonant, because otherwise you're just left at this unrelenting point of dissonance, and eventually the ear just finds that too hard to take. So that's the reason why you hear the first 6 modes a lot and mode 7 comparatively rarely. Alright, well, I hope that is clear enough. We're just going to give you one last comparison of all the modes now, from brightest to the very darkest, and you'll see how the whole thing stacks up. Okay, let's just go ahead and arrange the modes in order of brightness, from brightest first to darkest last. The brightest mode is Lydian. The construction of Lydian is 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7 and 1. The next mode after that is Ionian, the major scale construction, very simple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And then the darkest of our major modes, really a dominant character, is Mixolydian, construction 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7 and 1. On to the minor modes now. The least dark minor mode, Dorian, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7 and 1. After that, Aeolian, the natural minor scale, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7 and 1. And then the darkest of all the minor modes, which is Phrygian, which is 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7 and 1. And then we're left with the Joker, which is Locrian, which is 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7 and 1. So when you look at it like that, you can really see why Lydian is the brightest and why Locrian is absolutely the darkest. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, well that concludes this lesson on the intervallic construction of modes. I hope you found this useful and now you've got a really good appreciation of why each mode sounds the way it does. When my Modal Magic video comes out, I really do encourage you to have a look at it and purchase it if you can, because we've really only scratched the surface of modes here, and I'll be going into the subject in exhaustive detail on the video. So if you've enjoyed watching these videos, there'll be much more coming on the Modal Magic video, with of course tons of guitar playing as well, not just me sitting at the keyboard explaining stuff. So do check it out. Otherwise you can get me on SoundCloud at Rowan-Parker. I've got tons of backing tracks you can download from there, it's all free. My YouTube channel, of course, there's almost 170 videos up there now, all sorts of crazy guitar playing, lots of cool stuff. Website www.rowanjparker.com. I do Skype lessons and you can contact me by the website about that, and you can subscribe to the website and you get even more free stuff. All you need to do is stick your email address in the subscribe box, hit subscribe, and there's a whole smorgasbord of extra free things awaiting you, so please do subscribe. Alright, well I'm on Twitter as well. Hate Twitter, don't even bother, don't go there, just don't go there, right? But if you must, I'm on Twitter, and if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Twitter. And yeah, I'm on Facebook, of course, as well. I have a Facebook page you can like, which is Rowan J. Parker. Alright, well, enough of that. I will see you next week for another episode of Music Theory 101. We'll be tackling another scale. We'll be tackling the harmonic minor scale. So, till then, farewell.